You know, ladies, I talk a lot about hormone replacement therapy on this podcast because, yes, it can be life-changing for so many women. But here's what doesn't get talked about enough. HRT isn't a magic bullet. You can't just slap on some estrogen and expect to feel like your 25-year-old self overnight. Think of your body like a garden. You can throw a handful of seeds, aka hormones, onto dry, compacted soil and hope for the best. And sure, something might grow. But if you prep the soil first, clear the weeds, nourish the earth, tend to the environment, what grows will be strong, vibrant, and deeply rooted. That's the difference between just doing HRT and actually thriving on HRT. Today, we're diving into what it really means to prepare your body for hormone therapy. From the labs you'll want to run to the toxins that may be messing with your results to why your mindset and stress levels absolutely matter. We're covering it all. Joining me is the brilliant Elizabeth Katzman, a functional diagnostic nutrition practitioner with a fascinating background as a former medical malpractice attorney. She's combined her legal research superpowers with deep training in functional medicine to help women uncover the root causes of hormone dysfunction, thyroid issues, mold illness, and more. This episode is going to shift how you think about HRT and how you use HRT. So, welcome, Elizabeth. I'm so happy to have you here. It's like you're an old friend already.
Well, Karen, I have been listening to you weekly for a few years. I feel like I know you very well.
I know that was so cute because when we first got on the call with each other, she's like, I feel like I know you. I'm like, yeah, I feel like I know you too because I was looking through all her social media stuff and thinking, wow, I feel like I should already know this woman. And then she tells me that she listens to my podcast and that's why she feels like she should know me.
Yes,
But
you,
it is
you
like
come on a
that.
lot of hikes with me. You don't even know it.
Right, exactly. I love when people say that to me. They're like, we walk together every Saturday morning. It's like, oh, great. Or we drive together to work. But it is funny that you do really like you feel like you know the podcaster and you're just so familiar with their voice. I know that I've met some, podcasters now, of course, like tons of them, and
Yeah.
ones that I followed for years and like worshiped and like looked up to. And then I meet them in person and I'm like, oh my God, this like I feel like I'm meeting a famous person right
Yes.
now.
Yes. Well, and because we think so similarly and our little universe is
We
so
do.
similar that yeah, I definitely feel like there's a relationship there.
Yes, yeah. We should have already met, I feel
We should
like.
have.
So, anyways, here we are now, moving forward. Okay, so I do want you to just to touch in on how you shifted gears from being a lawyer to being a menopause and perimenopause specialist. Like that is a huge leap. And so did something happen with your hormones? Did something kind of drive you into this space?
I'll try to be brief because it is kind of a lifelong story because I've always
Yeah.
loved health and wellness. I've always been into it. But I grew up, I turned 50 this year. So when I was in high school, that was like late 80s, early 90s. And even though I was into health and wellness, the information that was put out at the time was just all wrong. So I was doing low fat, tons of
Oh, you
cardio,
same. Oh,
but I was quote unquote healthy. I was doing all of the things, but I wasn't a healthy person. So in law school and practicing, I was really struggling. I had taken birth control, which led to antidepressants, which is a common theme. It was really
mm,
get off of the antidepressants. So I would say I was kind of white knuckling my way through law school in those early years of practicing, because even though I was doing all of the right things that people knew at the time, they weren't actually great for optimal health. And then when I got pregnant, it was sort of no surprise that my first pregnancy, I was really sick because my body was not prepared for pregnancy. I stopped practicing law and just assumed I would go back. I was so naive, before you have kids, you just think, I thought, oh, I'm going
oh
to have a
gosh, yeah.
baby and go back to my spin
Do it
class.
all. Yeah. I love when people say that, like the parents that are pregnant for the first time and they're like, We're going to still travel. We're going to go
Yeah.
to Costa Rica for 6 months and we're going to go here and there. We're not going to let the baby, like restrict it. I'm
Change
like,
our lives.
yeah, yeah, good luck with that.
Yeah, I thought I'm just gonna hop back on that, 5 a.m. spin class and go to work. And then the second I saw his little face, I was like, okay, I need to stay home. I belong
Hmm.
with this little guy. And I ended up having 4 children, but my first 2 children were having chronic ear infections. And so I kept taking them to the pediatrician and getting antibiotics. And they said, we should look at their tubes. Maybe we have to have a surgery. And I thought, whoa, like this is crazy. And I realized I relinquished a lot of power to someone else
Mm,
to take care of these human beings that I was supposed to be taking care of. So I did research and it appeared that there might be a connection between ear infections and dairy consumption. So we cut out dairy and they never got another ear infection.
nice. Yeah.
And it was so profound. I thought these are little people that were 2 and 4 at the time that I was subjecting to antibiotics and potential surgery. And I was just sort of blindly following the advice I was giving. I wasn't seeking out other advice. I wasn't researching on my own. It was a big shift in the way I thought about health and wellness as it applied to them. And then I looked toward myself and realized that that pregnancy and delivery didn't go as I would have liked. I was really sick. It was induced. I had a bad tear. They used forceps. The whole thing seemed very forced and not natural. So, my other children, then I used midwives. My fourth, I had, at home in the bathtub. And it was just such a large arc of growth as far as how I viewed health and wellness that I was no longer going to be getting my information from like Self magazine that told me to eat 12
Right.
calories with no fat. You know? So it's it was an empowering time and I had a lot of catching up to do. I found other places like Integrative Institute for Nutrition, which I felt like was a nice starting point, but it wasn't quite as in depth as I was hoping for. And I really wanted to be able to run functional labs for my family. And at that time, there was a
Hmm.
lot of gatekeeping between consumer and labs. So I went to the FDN program for functional diagnostic nutrition, where I gained access to being able to order my labs. And it was really extensive training into how to look at them, how to interpret them, and it applied to any age. So initially, it was just for me and my kids. And then as they got older and I started talking to more moms about their issues, I would just say, send over your labs, I'll take a look. And I kind of grew into a business from there, which was not my original intention, but I do always like to work and stay active. So I welcomed it. I was happy to be more involved intellectually. At that
Yeah.
point, my kids were getting older, and then all those moms were coming into perimenopause at the same time as I was. So it just took a natural turn into focusing more on perimenopause and hormones, which is where I am now.
Yeah. And so let's start there because you hear a lot right now in social media. You're hearing from doctors and that specialize in menopause or perimenopause. A lot of them are saying no need for labs. We
Yeah.
don't need to check your labs. And I'm always just like, what? Why do they say that? Like, I get that, okay, if you're in menopause, yeah, you're probably not going to have any estradiol. You're definitely not having progesterone. Your testosterone, we're not sure that one, but there's so many things that we could be looking at in order to help set the stage for that HRT. So, what are you finding? Like, what do you look for in just basic blood work to help a woman prepare for her HRT?
Yeah, I do think that's a really sad and common message that's very loud right now. And I think part of the reason that's a loud message is because it's inconvenient to track a woman like that, especially if you have a telehealth platform that's backed by venture capital and
Mm,
you're not going to really want to run functional labs or even the basics because then that requires follow up. A lot of people that are saying that though are having to change their tune because they pride themselves on being evidence based. Well, now the evidence is showing with estradiol that it is clinically shown that in trials that we absorb estradiol differently. So you do in fact have to test. So I've been noticing a little bit of
I've
change
noticed
that
that
lately.
too.
They're forced into
Yes.
it because of that study, because of that paper. So even though it's inconvenient, now they're forced to do it a little more than they used to. And when I started getting into this space, one of the first books I read was from Suzanne Summers.
Hmm.
And her recommendation was as soon as possible, as young as possible, to get your hormone levels checked. So you have a baseline to look at.
Yeah.
And in the back of her book, 'cause this was before the internet was a real thing, she had a whole list of practitioners. And that's how I found Dr. Brownstein in Michigan. He was listed in her book. I went to him and I said, Suzanne Summer says I need to track my hormones. So I started in my 20s, and that was
Wow.
was so ahead of her time. Um, I recommend women check as young as possible because you want to look at a time in your life where you're feeling your best and most vital. That may not be, sadly, your 20s for a lot of people are struggling in those ages, but test them as early as possible and test yearly. And when we get into perimenopause, now you have a baseline. So even though things are fluctuating, you have a baseline. And our hormones fluctuate our entire life. You know, it's more so in perimenopause, but it's not a perfect science. You can test estradiol in the morning and it's different than in the afternoon. So, of course, if someone is cycling, if they're having a somewhat regular cycle, we want to try to do days 19 to 21. But estradiol is not the only marker, and blood tests aren't the only marker. We also want to be looking at lipid panels. And again, the younger the better. And we want fractionated lipid panels so we can see particle size and oxidation. And you'll see changes in someone's cholesterol profile in perimenopause. It's one of the easiest indicators. So even if there's a lot of noise about estradiol, and I still test it and I still find it to be a great tool, um, you also want to be looking at other markers like lipids. That's just a huge tell because your cholesterol is going to be going up as estradiol is going down.
Yeah.
And also great wearable devices like continuous glucose monitors. I recommend my clients use them. If they're 40 and above, I like them to do it maybe once or twice a year. And if they start seeing changes, maybe do it a little bit more because your ability to maintain proper glucose levels, a proper glucose response changes as estradiol declines. So that's also an early indicator. For me
Hmm.
personally, that's what was one of the reasons that put me over the top of like, okay, now it's really time for HRT because I couldn't maintain my glucose levels. Like I would just
Okay.
a little bite of a banana, a smoothie and then I'd have to go walk up and down the street to get it down. I'd have to do squats and like it wasn't a normal glucose management situation.
Wow. Yeah. I mean, we see that in our labs every day, all day. And I tell women that you can be super, super healthy and exercising and never had a blood sugar problem, never had a cholesterol problem, and then boom, it happens. And so really we're speaking to women that haven't had a problem with that prior because there's so much of our population right now naturally just has, or not naturally, but
Yeah.
has high blood glucose and high cholesterol because of their diet. And so that's a tough one, I think, when you have to kind of point that towards somebody that maybe necessarily didn't have that before, and then suddenly that's starting to happen. That's a sign then that your hormones are probably dropping.
Yeah, and I think it's also tough when we measure so much of health based on body size. So people assume just because they're thin that they don't have an issue with insulin
Yes.
glucose. And even honestly, if they're still lifting weights and doing protein and doing all of the things that you hear about, they will still have an issue. I mean,
Yep.
I was doing all of those things, lifting weights,
Same.
eating protein, apple cider vinegar, protein and fiber before carbs, like
Berberine. Oh, yeah. I know, right?
everything. And still,
Intermittent fasting. Like, yes.
yeah. And at some point, you just need estradiol.
Yeah, yeah. My blood sugar went up a point in the Canadian measurements, but up a point, and my cholesterol went up for the first time in my life when I started to drop the hormones. Same. So it happens across the board, I think, to everybody sooner or later if you
And
don't replace hormones.
And for me, it's not so much that I'm afraid of elevated cholesterol because cholesterol is
No.
quite healthy and it's been villainized and all of
Hmm.
that we that we know. But it's when you get a fractionated lipid panel, then you can see a huge increase in oxidized LDL. So that's where we worry about the elevated cholesterol, is when it's becoming oxidized. And as we lose estradiol, we are more subjected to oxidative stress. And, people always talk about inflammation and inflammaging, but what causes inflammation is oxidative stress. So at the very, very root would be a lack of estradiol, which leads to oxidative stress, which leads to inflammation. And so I love looking at the fractionated lipid panel to know that. And again, it's something that people should look at earlier in their 30s and do once a year, so that we're looking at patterns. We're not just looking at a 1 day snapshot of, a blood test of estradiol. We're putting it all together.
Yeah. What else would you want to test? Like if somebody can only do blood labs, we're going to get into the specialty testing because that's really, those things are very powerful, but not everybody can afford those. They tend to be quite expensive. So if somebody's just getting that, standard lab panel, CBC with differentials, lipid panel, and the hormones, what can you get from that?
I can get so much from that. And as much as I love the function testing that's just cash pay, I absolutely don't find it to be mandatory. It's icing on the cake, and it gives us more
Right.
information, but I can do so much with just fractionated lipid, CBC with differential, and your basic hormone panel, and of course a complete thyroid panel. And I know you've had Dr. Amy Horniman on, to discuss thyroid in depth and what she calls thyropause, which is so accurate. But so many symptoms of perimenopause and losing estradiol also correlate with losing thyroid function. Of course, we know that, with the loss of progesterone, we lose our ability to create T3 from T4. So we need to convert T4 to make the active form of T3. So people will find, their energy levels going down and fat gain from that, at the same time that it's also happening because of a lack of estradiol. So there's a lot of overlapping things that happen all at once. And most traditional doctors are not going to be running all those panels. If they do your thyroid, it's just TSH usually. Um, but that gives us a really complete picture of perimenopause. And I see it more often than not that people are losing their thyroid function at the same time that they're losing their estradiol. And then, of course, we want to correlate it all with symptoms. So usually if that's the picture that we're looking at, with a little bit of elevated cholesterol, some lowering maybe of estradiol, but maybe it's not showing up yet. But we're seeing some blood sugar dysregulation, and we're seeing some issues with thyroid, then we know we're in a perimenopause situation. If it's happening early and we're just seeing small changes, that's when I'm talking more about really cleaning things up, cleaning up liver function, cleaning up gut as much as possible, and adding in some adaptogens and maybe some maca and Vitex. And we can supplement with herbs at that point until
Yeah.
we get into, the late perimenopause situation where it really is, your body's like screaming for actual estradiol and progesterone.
Yeah, and the ovaries are just no longer, they're just gone kaput.
Yeah, and I like to start early and slowly with women, because I think a lot of women are still afraid of HRT.
Hmm.
It may take them a couple years to warm up to the idea. And so if you can start them thinking more holistically about their body and their gut and their liver function, and they're taking some herbs, and they're sort of more in tune to what they're experiencing, and they can feel the decline, then when the time comes where they need HRT, they've already taken the time to be more educated and to be more aware. And at that point, I feel like they're more receptive to it.
Hmm. What are you testing for to see how the liver's functioning?
I mean, there's AST and ALT on that you can just get from a blood test, from your
Hmm.
CBC with differential. And I find that that's really effective. I like it below a 15, um, below a 25 for sure. So I do see that elevated quite a bit. I'm a huge fan of castor oil packs. I do them every night. I find them to be
Do
very real
you?
every night.
Oh, on your liver? or everywhere, all
I
over?
actually do it everywhere. When I was sick
Move it
with,
around?
I would just do it on my liver, but now I do it everywhere. And yeah, it's part of like when I'm hanging out with my kids and we'll watch a show or we'll read. And I don't do that. There's a lot of elaborate protocols. For me, it's very simple. I just put castor oil with some essential oils on. I put a flannel on top and a heating pad on top of that, and I jump into bed.
Ooh,
And it's funny because on my Aura ring, I immediately go from whatever state I was in to restored. Like I plummet down to like, you are relaxed.
really? Oh
Yeah, my
my
body does.
gosh. I used them when I was doing heavy metal detox, and I would start to feel it in my thyroid. My thyroid would literally start to ache when I was doing heavy metal detox. And the thyroid loves heavy metals. So mercury will have an affinity for the thyroid. And so I started doing castor oil packs on my throat, and it would get rid of it every
Uh,
time.
Castor oil packs are miraculous. If you have, fibroid breasts, you put the castor oil on your breast with the heating pad on top. It's really magical for that as well. And in perimenopause, we don't get enough oxygen flow to our ovaries. So that's why instead of just doing it over my liver, I put it everywhere to get circulation to my ovaries. And I usually like to do something for my lymph first to get everything opened up. So you can do, the 7 point of lymph stimulation first with a little dry brushing or hop on a rebounder first. I have really been loving getting in a swimming pool for lymph. Women, as we age, we get that not just crepey skin, but we actually get like fluid underneath the skin where it's
Hmm.
and it's not quite cellulite. It's more like lymphatic fluid that's stuck. And so if you just go in a swimming pool, swimming is great, but also standing up to your neck. And it's also great for your nervous system. But the pressure and the difference of pressure that you get from your ankles, 5 feet down all the way up is like the perfect amount of change in pressure to get your lymph going. And it's really helpful for that look that your skin gets as we
So we
age.
should all be joining the aqua aerobics.
100%.
Yeah,
Honestly, I see those women. I'm like, that is
it's
exactly.
awesome.
Yeah. Yes.
Right? Like so easy on the joints. And then now it like, can help with the lymphatic system.
Yes. And it's a huge help with the lymphatic system. And then if you do a castor oil pack, now everything's really moving and clearing out. And there's great liver supplements to help. And then I still, even though I'm not sick with mold anymore, I'm genetically susceptible to mold. So my liver doesn't recognize it as a toxin. I hold on to it. So
Okay.
on a daily basis, I just treat myself as if, right? Because it's always easy to prevent rather than cure. So I'll take a liver detox supplement, do my castor oil pack, and then I'll take a binder. You can take any binder, charcoal, clay, chlorella, zeolite, but you're releasing a lot of stuff. So then it's great to take a binder and get rid of it. The same thing when I take a sauna, I'll take a binder. And some people will say don't take binders daily. I've heard
Yeah.
practitioners say that because it can bind to minerals and
Hmm.
vitamins, but I always supplement with minerals. I do ocean minerals and beam minerals. So you do want to remineralize and make sure you don't take binders next to vitamins and supplements, but it's never been an issue for me.
Do you see, I see a lot of women when they start hormone replacement therapy gaining weight, and
Mhm.
especially from the estrogen. And I always relate it to, okay, your body is not metabolizing this, or they've been without it for so long that they go into that estrogen dominant phase while their body adjusts and the receptors, go back to normal. Would you say that doing something like a castor oil pack or like daily castor oil pack on the liver, and then also doing binders and a supplement, like a detox liver support supplement, do you see that helping prevent that or helping get rid of that weight gain?
Yes. If I have a client who's willing, I like to do a 3-month protocol before we start on HRT.
Really?
So when I first take them
Okay.
on as a client, before I even see labs, before I even know, I just say, let's start this protocol because it's going to only help you no matter what. And just in case we want to start HRT, now we know you're cleaned up and you're ready to accept it. Like Karen and Kristen always say, you need to be what do they say? A prepared host, or you're only, the HRT is as good as the host that you are. You have to be a good
Right.
host. Otherwise, it's
Right.
swimming around with nowhere to go. Yeah, I find women will get puffy and gain weight with estrogen and also with progesterone.
Yep.
Uh, it can go both ways. And I also see a lot of women, I can't believe how many women are getting both at the same time in trochees or, um,
Oh, yes.
and then you
Combined creams. Yeah.
find, yes. So not
Yeah.
only taking progesterone all month long, which we don't want, but also I have no idea what they're reacting to, if it's the estrogen or the progesterone.
Yeah. Or sometimes a lot of time testosterone will be thrown in too.
Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah.
And I genetically hold on to testosterone. So I get water retentive if I take too much.
Yeah.
So that's mine that I have to be careful of. And it has to do with my glucuronidation pathways.
Well, and that's the thing too, especially with testosterone and the way that people tend to convert it or not to DHT. And a lot of that is genetic. And so testosterone, I feel like, is the most challenging because even if you have fully cleaned out your gut, liver, and your receptors and kind of have optimized how you're addressing your estrogen and progesterone, even when, I think we both agree that testosterone should be the last step then. But even then, if you do it properly in the right order, a lot of people just still can't handle exogenous testosterone,
Nope,
which is
I totally agree. Yeah. It's like
some,
most women we see need it
yeah,
more and more so. They need it. Because for a period of time, we actually considered not prescribing testosterone anymore because there were so many women that just reacted to it that, eventually they would start, losing their head hair, getting, chin whiskers and having these side effects from it. And then got really quite challenging to get as well because telemedicine was changing and they were like, oh, you got to see your doctor once a year in order to get testosterone. And things are okay, especially since COVID. They're a little more relaxed on those rules, but yeah, I just find that most women need it, but most women eventually react to it too. So it's
yeah,
it's it's too bad.
it's a tricky one. And it's also
Hmm.
one of the only hormones where I would say, obviously the Dutch test in functional circles, we like the Dutch test. Unfortunately, it's an expensive test that's not accessible to everyone. But I really, in general, I don't feel comfortable giving someone testosterone without seeing a Dutch and knowing what pathway they're preferring. So that's the one time that I'm like, if you want to do testosterone, I really would love if we could have a Dutch, because otherwise I feel like you're kind of rolling the dice and you don't know if you're going to get acne and lose your hair. Um, so I feel like it's interesting because so many 20 and 30-year-olds are taking testosterone and
Oh God,
acting like it's no big
they should
deal
not. Yeah, yeah,
without looking carefully at how they individually do it. And so you'll hear a success story here and there, and then they'll be like, oh, well, it worked for her. So, let me start right away and build my muscle. And then they lose their hair.
yeah. Let's go throw the pellets in. That's what they think, right? Yeah, no.
Ideally,
Oh,
I like to stick with, the cheap tests that are covered under insurance, the blood test, that's great. But every once in a while, there's a time where I say, I would really like to do some more functional testing. I I was listening to one of the sort of louder voices in the menopause space that are maybe not giving the best information, and she was saying how um, you know, every she was talking about estrogen and someone asked the question, I take estrogen and I started taking more, but I still don't feel good and I have brain fog and I have a hard time sleeping. She was listing all these symptoms and I thought, boy, she sounds moldy. Like all of my little mold antennas are going off and the doctor said you just need more estrogen. And I
oh,
thought, holy cow, now they're not only are they saying we don't necessarily need to test estrogen, let's just give more, but they're not even opening their minds to the fact that someone could be struggling with mold,
something
which,
else.
25% of our population has susceptibility to mold. It's quite a lot of people, and it's getting worse. Um, so we don't always need to dive into the more functional labs, but if someone's having odd symptoms that aren't getting addressed with HRT, then we need to. I love Dr. Campbell. He's one of my mentors for mold. He has my Myco lab. I love his test for mold. It's a blood test. Urine tests are not as accurate as blood for mold, but that's
Okay.
That's a test I'll throw in if we've done all the basic blood work and we're addressing everything. I find mold a lot.
Because what will happen, like in the sense, like if somebody did have mold and they're on HRT, is it actually blocking the receptors so that they can't, as I know heavy metals does that. Does mold act the same way?
Well, it clogs your liver, so you can't metabolize anything else. So
Oh, okay.
including alcohol, you're going to get more drunk or anything. Everything's going to be circulating. Your liver is just completely clogged because your body doesn't realize it needs to be getting rid of it. So you have a congested liver. And so that's why a lot of times, for me, I had Hashimoto's when I was sick with mold. And that's a very typical story, because you can't metabolize your thyroid hormones properly because your liver's clogged. And luckily, I knew what I was looking for. And so I only had markers for Hashimoto's for like 2 months, and then it was gone.
Wow.
I'm really blessed. I mean, honestly, God was watching over me because it happened to coincidentally be at a time where I was diving into those issues with blood work. And so I knew what to look for. But if I didn't know, I mean, people are sick with mold for years and sick with thyroid issues for years. But I knew like day one what it was. I had a really good intuition about it because I had rented an RV, and I was deathly sick after. So it was a very clear to me that it was
Yeah.
mold. And I knew to look at my thyroid, and I knew that I had never had Hashimoto's before. So I knew it was the mold. And then within a couple of months, everything was cleared. But I busted my ass. I thought I was going to die, and I worked so hard to clear it out. Um, I couldn't eat anything but fresh meat 3 times a day. I couldn't eat any fruits or vegetables because I could.
What?
My liver was so congested that I tried to drink a smoothie, and I literally thought I was going to have to call 911 because my throat was closing up from the histamines. I couldn't breathe. And then when I would eat anything with vegetables with sulfur, I'd run to the bathroom with diarrhea. I couldn't have anything with sulfur or histamine. So even the meat had to be fresh, fresh, and
Oh my gosh. So basically like you developed instant histamine intolerance from the mold exposure.
instant. So yeah, so meat, breakfast, lunch, and dinner. And then eventually I could add in a little bit of honeydew, and
Because you were actively killing off the
yeah,
mycotoxins?
yeah. So it was a whole protocol of saunas, niacin, which niacin's one of my favorite things for clearing up receptors. Not everyone loves the flush. I happen to enjoy it. I like to feel when something's working. So I'd take a niacin, jump in the sauna, dry brush, make sure my lymph was really going, sweat, take a binder. But if I had let it go too long, if you have thyroid antibodies going on too long and they attack you for long enough, then you really do lose your thyroid functions and you have to take medication. So I was happy to be able to catch it early enough, um, to address it. But I don't think most cases of mold are not as serious as mine was. And I'm really thankful for that experience. But even with someone with mild symptoms of mold, if they're getting hives, seasonal allergies, there's always a reason behind seasonal allergies, right? It's a sign that your bucket is full. It's not normal to have seasonal allergies. Um, it means that you need to be cleansing your liver. Our body should be able to deal with these things. So a good receptor detox for every woman, but particularly if she's showing histamine signs. I like to do a low histamine diet, because not forever, um, but for a short period of time while you're doing a receptor detox. I like Biotics. Biotics has a great formulation called Receptor Detox, that I do with most clients when we first meet. Because most
Yeah.
people live in such a toxic world, most people are going to have some cleaning up to do.
Yeah. And so so kind of 3 month liver detox, does that include what you would use the biotics receptor
Yeah.
detox in that protocol?
Yeah, and it has some niacin in it, but I like to do, if people have a sauna or they go to their gym and use the sauna there, I do like to throw in like a 500 milligram intense niacin flush a couple times a week. where you
Why?
are,
What does that do?
it's a vasostimulator, a
Yeah.
dilator. So it's, you're opening everything up. You're bright red and very hot.
Yes, I've had them. I hate them. The first time it happened to me was on an airplane to India. So you can imagine, I thought I was having an allergic reaction. I was going to die. And my mom's like, she was with me and she goes, "Oh my gosh, no, I think it was because I gave you that B complex or whatever it was that had
Yes.
niacin in it." And I was like totally red in the face and itching and thinking something bad was about to happen.
I thought the
But
same
yeah,
thing the first time I did it. I was woefully unprepared. And I remember running over to my husband and being like, "Do you see me? Is there, I think there's something really wrong."
having anaphylactic or
Yeah.
something.
Yes. But it opens everything up. And so when you couple it with a sauna and then you take a binder after, and of course you want to remineralize. So you take electrolytes and ocean minerals to make sure that you're not getting dehydrated. But it's a great way to stimulate detox, and niacin's great for receptor detox.
What's the order of that? Because I always get confused. Do I take the binder before I get in the sauna so that it's in my system by the time everything starts to get released, or are you taking it after the sauna?
If I take niacin, then I take my binder after. If I
Okay.
don't take niacin, I just take a regular sauna. I'll take my binder when I get in. And
Okay.
I'll always do an ocean minerals. I like the
The
quintessential.
quintessential. Yeah.
Yeah, I usually do a packet of that before or after um, because the minerals are really important. It's like anything, there's moderation. People get really into saunas and then you can see their electrolytes get really out of whack and it can take a long time to get them back. It can take quite a few months to get your electrolytes back.
Yeah, yeah. I'll do an element usually in the sauna, an element electrolyte pack. And then when I'm in there, I always have my Beam mineral spray. And
Yeah,
the whole time I spray my body and let it dry, spray it, let it dry. I always spray tons on my thyroid. I always feel like because it's fulvic and humic minerals, that maybe that'll be pulling out some of that heavy metals out of the thyroid. I don't know if it does, but I think so. I mean, it does enter in through the skin.
yeah.
So
Yeah, I love the beam spray. I'll do the shot. I usually do the shots in the morning, and I do like the
same.
spray when I get out of the sauna, and it
Yeah.
smells.
Yes, it does. I have the lavender one in there right now, and it's amazing. But yeah, okay. So we're doing a 3 month
Yeah.
liver detox. And I think that that's such an amazing way to prepare your body for HRT because the liver has to process so much of these things, right? So I love that. And I wish everybody would do that. And it's,
And the other thing that a lot of clients don't want to hear is the alcohol component.
yeah, that's what I was going to ask next.
I figured they
Talking
both
about
say
the
the same.
liver, what's alcohol doing? Because we know, did you know this actually? This is somebody told me this last year that I was interviewing this guy about alcohol, and he was saying that across all sectors, alcohol consumption has gone down, except for in midlife women. It's gone up, which
I
is really sad.
It is sad, and I see it. I mean, I see it with I've got an 18-year-old and his group of friends, and honestly,
Yep.
drinking isn't as huge as it used to be in that young group.
No, I have an 18-year-old too, and it's crazy. I'm like, oh my gosh, if she only knew what I was doing at 18, like, right? Like I've seen her
Yes.
drink maybe a handful of times, and that's it. I'm like, thank goodness.
Yeah, I feel like our age group drank much more in the younger years, and maybe we just haven't let go of it yet because everyone else has seemed to have gotten the memo that
Yeah,
it's
right.
poison, it's shrinking our brains. But I think it is just an indicator of the suffering that's going on in these years that, it's extreme anxiety that people are trying to address with alcohol. And it's understandable. It makes them feel better for a minute and then they feel worse the next day. But I really just encourage women to give it a chance. Give it, anything takes roughly 21 days to sort of become a habit for you to get used to. So just give yourself 21 days without it and to feel how much better you feel and how much less anxiety you're going to have just from not drinking alcohol.
Mhm.
But it's a poison and our body's going to want to process it first and foremost above anything else. So our liver is going to be focused on the alcohol and it's not going to be taking care of our hormones. So if we're trying to add HRT onto a liver that's getting alcohol multiple times a week, it's not going to make us feel good. We're going to have circulating estrogen that's going to lead to, the issues that people have with estrogen dominance. And it's not necessarily that you're getting too much estrogen, you're just not metabolizing it and utilizing it. And I think that that is between not drinking alcohol and convincing women the importance of animal protein. I would say those are my two biggest challenges. A lot of women like working out. So the whole conversation about muscle and stuff isn't the worst one. Um, but there's a lot of people that are still hanging on to being vegan. I've noticed
Mhm.
I was vegan for a long time. I understand it. I also am more educated now about the benefits of um, regenerative farming and how great it is for our topsoil and the environment, and sort of the reverse of what I used to think when I was a vegan, that I thought it was horrible for the environment and inhumane. And I make sure that I buy, my meat from good sources that are humanely raised. I do still think all of that's important. But I really value um, animal protein. And that's been such a hard issue. And I know for me, when I was sick with mold, like I said, I could only eat meat. Meat's very healing. Um,
Yes, and people don't realize that it's how important it is for detoxification,
for,
animal protein.
it's so important for detox. I know everyone thinks a green drink, which can
Yeah,
actually
I was
so
going to
many,
say like juicing.
right. And you're getting a bunch of oxalates and all of and it's not organic a lot of the times, but meat is very cleansing for our liver, which seems,
We
and
need the amino acids to
we need the
properly
amino acids.
detox.
And our brains need the amino acids. And when we're experiencing the anxiety of perimenopause, we need even more of those meat-based amino acids. Um, so it's challenging to convince a woman or try to educate a woman about why eating meat is cleansing when their whole life it's been all juices, and that meat just sits in your stomach and it's heavy. And yes, you might need to add in digestive enzymes, and you might need to add in some hydrochloric acid as those things decline with estradiol's decline. So there is some support that needs to take place there, but cutting out alcohol and getting more animal-based protein
Is
are
some of the best advice. Yeah.
for prepping for HRT, for our liver function, uh,
Hmm.
and for our mental health.
Hmm. Yeah. And I think too, women, they need to, if they if they are heavy drinkers or light drinkers, but they're doing it every day, they're having that nightly glass of wine. It is really them giving themselves permission to relax, and they justify it through the drink, right? So it's much easier to go, I'm going to have a glass of wine while I'm making dinner, or it's the end of day, I'm going to have my glass of wine and relax and take the edge, take the edge off. And I've had a stressful day. And it's like this gift that they give themselves, and they can totally justify that over, I'm just going to take a time out. I'm going to go read a book. I'm going to go have a pedicure. I'm going to go have a massage. I'm going to just meditate. I'm going to go in my sauna. Those things are so much harder for them to do than to just have that glass of wine. And so I always tell women, if you want to cut back on alcohol, which we highly recommend, Elizabeth and I, that replace it, make sure you replace it with something. Give yourself something else. Because if you just try and stop it, and
Uh,
that was your one thing that you were giving to yourself to help you to relax at the end of the day, it's going to be a matter of time before you go back to it. And so give it to yourself in other areas of your life so that you don't feel like you need to have that drink.
I agree. I'm fortunate that the things that relax me at night are help. I like to take a bath with Epsom salt. I like to take a sauna. I like to do my castor oil. So those for me are my alone time. This is just me. I'll put a sign on my door so my kids know. It says I'm meditating, but basically it just means I'm
Good
alone.
for you.
And they're very respectful of that. And I think that people also don't give their kids enough credit. If you explain to your kids you need a little time alone, that they're fine.
Yeah.
People have this moms, we've got this constant mom guilt, and our kids need us every second, and if they need me, but they're very kind and understanding and intelligent. They can understand if you have a sign on the door that you need 30 minutes. You
And
know,
then what are you teaching them? You're teaching them to take care of themselves. And so in the future, they won't have a problem going, I'm going to go meditate for 30 minutes.
yeah. And I wish there were better alternatives if you just wanted like a little buzz, but honestly, it's hard because even CBD and THC, reduces oxygen flow to our brain at a time when we're so vulnerable to Alzheimer's and neurodegenerative issues. I had a brain scan at Dr. Amon's office a
Oh,
few
wow.
years ago, and I plan on doing it every couple years just to check up.
Yeah.
But it's funny, we get a checkup on every other system in our body, and we're so susceptible to Alzheimer's, so much more than men because of what we go through in menopause. And yet no one
Mhm.
gets scans of their brain to even check
Yeah.
where they stand. I
Yeah.
mean, Lisa Mosconi is doing great research where she had her own machine built. And even in the few women that she has in her lab, that she's showing such huge shrinkage in hippocampal volume in a very short period of time, which is why
Wow.
we don't want to wait. We want to start with HRT in perimenopause as it's happening. You don't want to wait until your brain shrunk.
No, thank you. Yeah, or your bones are gone, you
Yeah.
know? And it's like, oh my God, don't take it estrogen until you're in menopause. Danger, danger. And it's like, no, because
The
all this is already happening. Our brains are being affected, our bones are being affected, our mitochondria is being affected.
Yeah, it's prevention, it's not a cure. It's a prevention. And I think it's when you bring up mitochondria, that's also, I think, another thing tied into the alcohol because we do lose so much mitochondrial function that it becomes more difficult to just function through our daily lives. And so that alcohol or reaching for sugar is a way of dealing with low mitochondrial function as well.
Hmm. Hmm. What about the gut? Because the gut is I think everybody's gut is not doing well. I don't care how well you eat. I think just being exposed to all of the things that we are being exposed to, the stress alone, the depletion of hormones, all of these things can affect our gut health. Why is it important that we get our gut intact or at least better? It's like tend, like I said in the beginning, it's like tending to the soil first, making sure that the soil is nice and rich. Why is this important before you start HRT?
Well, and again, why we want to start HRT earlier rather than later, because as we lose estradiol, we lose our gut lining integrity and we lose our biodiversity. So the longer we go without estradiol and the longer we go with low levels, the more compromised our gut is. So it's a vicious cycle. And we
Mm.
need proper gut function, and we need our estrobolome to have the right diversity in order to metabolize the estrogen that we will give it. So if you don't have the right microbes, we're not going to be metabolizing our estrogen properly. So if we're taking HRT, it can make us feel worse. Unfortunately, gut testing is one of the more expensive functional tests. So for someone that doesn't want to spend hundreds of dollars on a functional test, stick with the basics, which I always say when you eat, think of feeding your gut more so than you're feeding yourself. So I like to eat as many colors as possible because I know that each one of those polyphenols, each one of those different colors is going to feed different microbes in my gut. So I want to be supporting the diversity. We want to think about fermented foods like sauerkraut and apple cider vinegar and anything that's going to grow the population in our gut, because the more diversity, the better. And you can look at these functional labs and it can tell you if you have an overgrowth of more bad ones or which ones you're lower in, and you can sort of target your probiotics toward those. And that's great. And if someone wants to pay the money, that's great. But you don't have to if you just stick with the basics. And as much as I love meat, I also love fiber and polyphenols. Meat does have polyphenols, but we need both. So this is another thing that you see all the time with this, carnivore diet, vegan, like all of these things. It's really about moderation and not making ourselves crazy, but just think about, having the basics. I'm not a big calorie counter. Other than
Hmm.
protein, I'm not a big macro counter. Um, but it makes sure that we're getting enough colors in our diet to feed our gut and enough probiotics, which most cultures do, and we've really lost that. Um, the only caveat to that would be someone dealing with mold who has histamine issues will have a hard time with sauerkraut is pretty high in
Yes. Yeah.
anything fermented like that. So it's individual. Uh,
Hmm.
for the most part, we want to think about as much diversity as possible.
Yeah. And so would you say that a woman would be like if she's in late perimenopause and having gut problems suddenly, it's beneficial to start the estrogen because that's going to help with the gut integrity at that point, likely. And then at the same time, also, possibly doing the GI map test or some sort of a gut test and addressing any sort of problems or imbalances that we have, like coinciding with each other, like so that we're doing them together rather than doing the gut first, then the hormones, or vice versa.
I ideally like to do it first, because we're only talking about waiting another maybe 6 to 8 weeks. So I kind of like to know what I'm dealing with, especially if we're dealing with something like you were mentioning with beta glucuronidase, if we know that that's, high, if we need to address that a little bit. I like to just take a beat and look
Yep.
as much as I can first.
And then what's your favorite gut test?
I vacillate between, I like Genova 3-day if I think that there's potential parasites. And the GI map I like as well, but there's no perfect gut test.
No.
I've seen, this is going to be TMI, but I think it's important to share that. So I've had two severe parasite infections where I could see them. And I did a GI map where I saw it right there, and then the test said negative. And I was like, okay. So
Oh, yeah, yeah.
it's not 100%. I think it's better for showing what kinds of bacteria you have or don't have, and it's not the best with parasites. So I tend to go with the 3-day Genova because at least that gives me 3 days of different checkpoints. Um, I do think that parasites are more common than people think. I used to foster a lot of animals. Um,
Oh,
and I wore rubber gloves and everything. But yeah, every time I go to my vet and she's not wearing gloves, and I think, oh girl, I don't
oh,
think you
because
would
she's probably just riddled with them.
think.
Yeah,
I,
and I've heard that if you have an animal, you've got parasites, like a pet.
yeah, if you have an
It's just a
animal that
given.
goes outside and they, are giving you kisses or anything, I mean, it transfers more easily than people think. So I am a fan of doing a parasite cleanse twice a year.
Okay.
I
Any particular one that you like?
Oh boy, I have such an extensive protocol. It's a little bit hardcore.
Oh, okay.
I do I mix between I like Quicksilvers and Cellcore
Yep.
products,
Same.
and I combine them, and then I'll do coffee enemas
Yep.
with, and I kind of it's and I get everything going.
Yep. Yep. Those are my two favorite too. Like for many things, Cellcore and Quicksilver. They have some of the best products for detoxification, I think, whether it's heavy metals, parasites, gut stuff. Yeah, for sure.
They know the right process. They know how to open up pathways and how to get everything flowing properly. So it's quite effective without having, a Herx reaction where you feel worse.
Mhm.
Really good process where you can clean yourself out but not get sick.
Yeah, and I think that if somebody had to choose, like, do I find out if I actually have parasites by doing a GI map and spending the $500 on the test, or do I just kind of go with my symptoms? I've got gut problems, so might as well just, skip the testing and just go for the protocol. And because it'll get rid of, over like yeasty candida overgrowth in the gut. It's going to get rid of the parasites. It's going to do all of the things, right? And so it can't, the way I see it is it can't hurt as long as you're repopulating the gut afterwards.
Yeah, I like to save my money for supplements. Stool test is great for calprotectin and beta glucuronidase and things like that. And there's other things that it's great for. Parasites is something I just think, do a good cleanse once or twice a year, just in case, because we come across them all the time. But
Yeah.
yeah, I think to just keep with general health practices and save the money for good supplements.
hmm I interviewed the owners of Cellcore, uh, Dr. J. Davidson, I think it is.
Yeah,
I always get it confused. And then Todd Watts. Todd
yeah,
Watts, Dr. Todd Watts. Okay, so Dr. Todd was like the parasite guy. And it was super interesting. I interviewed him for a thyroid summit that I did years ago. And he was saying that on labs, he can see in a thyroid panel if somebody has parasites. Isn't that wild?
yeah. Well, you can see it from a CVC with differential. You can see the
I was
eosinophils.
going to say the sonophils. Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
I've seen them, up to like 25. And I'm like,
Oh,
you have
wow.
it
Yeah.
could be it could be from an allergic reaction, like if someone's allergic to a cat and they were spending time with a
Hmm.
cat, it could be that. But if they're telling me nothing's really different, they haven't been exposed to anything that they felt an allergy to, that's parasites.
Okay. Yeah. And I heard anything kind of above three on
Yes.
the eosinophils
Yeah.
is possible indication of either, yeah, I heard food sensitivity or parasites,
Yeah. It's some type of allergy, but
some type of allergy. Okay.
yeah, or parasites. So I've seen it really high though, and I'm positive in those cases.
Wow. And yeah, Dr. Todd says every single person has parasites. He's like, there's no, we can't get away from them. So it's just best to assume that you have them.
Yeah, I think it's one of those things that you hear on social media and think it's like well,
Yeah.
whatever trendy thing, and these people don't know what they're talking about. But I can tell you for many years, I've been doing elaborate cleanses. I know what I've seen. And I've hit it. I hit it pretty hard, like harder than I think your average bear would. And so I know that it's more common than
Yeah.
people
Ooh.
realize.
All right. Dutch test. How do you feel about the Dutch test and when should that be done?
If I can, in a perfect world, I would love everyone to do a Dutch before they start HRT. I know that it's not realistic for everyone. It is an expensive test, but it's really amazing for a baseline. I don't feel the need to do it every 6 months or even every year, but I think in an ideal world, it'd be great to do it just once before someone
That's what
starts.
I think. Yeah, yeah. I always tell menopausal women that don't do the Dutch until they've been on HRT for a while because most of the time that'll come back with like it's not accurate because their levels are so low we can't see how they're metabolizing the estrogen, and so in those cases I'll say wait till you're on the HRT for 3 to 6 months, you're at the dose that you're going to be at for a while, and then test. But yeah, I think at some point it's beneficial to do a Dutch test. Like every single woman should at some point. And there are other ones coming out now. We just have been looking into a couple different places. Vibrant Wellness now has a
Yeah.
hormone test. Physician Labs has one. These are urine metabolite tests that are less expensive and they seem to be just as accurate. Like the testing, I've done a couple different ones now and they've turned out the same as my Dutch test. So I know that they're accurate. I've tried some that weren't accurate, so we don't sell those ones anymore. But I do find that they're starting to get more and more. And so I'm hoping that that's going to drive Dutch tests down in price because
I
there's
think
more
it'll
coming on the market.
I do think it'll have to. And I do agree with you. So most people I deal with are perimenopause, but I agree that if someone's menopausal and haven't had hormones, to wait 3 months after they start HRT.
Yeah.
Um, but for a perimenopausal woman to ideally start it first to know what direction they're headed. And like we said before about testosterone, especially if someone's considering adding in testosterone. Um, but I just feel like it's so helpful. And even though at the end of the day, we need to be doing all of the things that a Dutch would tell us, it's like, okay, so maybe it's giving you an indication of you need to take sulforaphane, or maybe you need more magnesium or NAC, or there's certain supplements that it can send you in the direction of. But for the
Mm.
most women at this stage of life should be supporting those things anyway. Most of us need magnesium anyway. Most of us
Hmm.
fix anyway. And um, so in general, we should be doing those things, but I think it can be a good motivator for someone when you show them, listen, you really do need to be taking these supplements. And I think that traditional doctors will poo-poo that test because they don't understand actually the value in it. And it's one of the indicators I tell a woman when they're searching for a practitioner is to ask them if they do the Dutch test. And there could be a number of answers that could be a red flag. If they
Ooh.
say like, yes, you have to do it, to me, that's a money grab. Like, I don't, that's a warning. And if someone says absolutely not, I think that it's bunk and there's no evidence behind it. That's a warning too. There's like two opposite ends of the spectrum on that one. Um, but but if someone says, I am aware of it, I don't really use it, I think it's interesting. Okay, to me, that's not, don't work with them. To me, that's
Yeah.
someone minded.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah. Yeah. But the ones that are like, oh, it's a waste of your money, as you know what? I've done thousands of these tests and I don't see it being a waste. very
Yeah.
rarely, unless the person has no hormones, like I said. Then it's a waste. Then it's like, ooh, you probably should not have done it yet. But in most cases, yeah, I think it's fine. I think
I
it's
find that anyone that's really passionate about like a hard yes or a hard no about kind of anything in this space is not
yes.
someone that's looking at an individual
Yes. Yeah. Agreed.
or of like religious beliefs that are attached to their philosophies instead of, okay, this is a person and every person we should treat differently and may need different things.
Yeah. When it comes to mind, body, I see that you do some somatic work. Can you explain what that means?
Yeah, well, yes. I think I've had nervous system regulation issues most of my life.
Same.
As a child, the first time I passed out, I was in sixth grade. No one picked me up from school. Like my
Oh,
parents were divorced and they kind of forgot and I was panicked. And I was walking down the hallway and I passed out.
oh.
And then it happened twice in high school. I wore a heart rate monitor around for 24 hours. I think it was probably POTS with mold exposure, since I think I had, symptoms of mold my whole life that wasn't recognized. So for me, nervous system management is just such a crucial part in my personal life. And I also have found with clients, especially people who have been exposed to mold, because it messes up your limbic system and you can't think straight and you really need to rewire your brain and put the time into that. Um, so I have tried all kinds of different things. I got certified with a company called NeuroFit. They have a NeuroFit app. It was sort of a leap of faith because I didn't know much about them. But the certification program was so interesting and the app was really great and it worked out fantastic. You put your finger over the camera on your phone and it measures your HRV.
Hmm.
You type in your symptoms. Do you feel like dorsal where you're just checked out and you're not engaged in life? Or are you up here and you're too amped up? And it'll recommend just quick 3-minute exercises to either waken you up a little bit or calm you down a little bit. And then you can measure your HRV again after and see your kind of
Oh,
progress. So I like that immediate feedback.
yeah.
And when I first started doing, was my first week of certification, I feel like it was only 3 days in, my HRV on my Aura ring like tripled.
No.
And I was only doing them a couple times a day. Yeah, very effective. So it's really just getting your mind and your body connected.
Yeah.
Most of us are just so disconnected. And, grounding does that, and PEMF does that, and cold plunge smacks you in the face and does, there's
Yeah.
There's a lot of things that help connect our mind and body, but somatic exercises are really quick and easy. I have a bunch of them on my website, and the app has a bunch of them, and you don't have to sit for 45 minutes on a mountain and meditate. You
What's
can do
the app called? I'll put it in the show notes.
It's NeuroFit.
Neurofit. I've heard of this. Okay. I'm gonna try it because my HRV is always so low and I'm always trying to get it up. And I'm like, it just drives me crazy because I know that it's all very, individual as far as HRV goes, and people can naturally have a low HRV, but I have always wanted to see if I could increase it.
It
So,
increased it so quickly because I thought I was one of those people that I was like, I just have a low HRV.
yeah. Like
But
what was your numbers?
it was like a 40 or 50 and
Okay.
went to like 80s and 90s, which for me is huge.
Oh my God.
Like,
Mine's always 23, 24.
what about breath work? Do you do breath work? Because for
Yep.
me, that makes a huge difference. Have you done like a heavy breath work session and then that night seen a difference?
Not yet. But I haven't, I think I've tried a few times where I've done like the 4-7-8 breath or box breathing and then looked at my aura ring. Well, I have the ultra human ring, but it'll tell me my stress markers and my HRV, and I don't notice anything.
So for me, I offer those techniques, the box breathing and stuff to clients because for some people it works. For me, it's not enough. So I have to do the kind where you actually feel lightheaded, more of the Wim Hof, like
Okay.
where you spend, 5 to 10 minutes of very intense breath work and
Yep.
it skyrockets. So I think you just need to be pushed a little bit more beyond your comfort zone to see the difference.
Okay, well, I'm going to try that because I always felt like Wim Hof it was almost too stimulatory. Like it brought my nervous system too high. And so I was like, maybe this isn't the right one for me. But I've never tested it. So I'm going to do the opposite and I'll test and I'll use this NeuroFit app and see what happens. But I like that. And yes, I did see on your website, you had multiple different YouTube videos where you kind of show different means of connecting that mind body uh, system, whether it was through, I think you did a box breathing one, you did some tapping,
Yeah, tapping.
and I can't remember what the other ones were, but those are, you guys can all access that on Elizabeth's website.
And for women, especially perimenopause, mold, anyway, when divorce, like in these situations where you know you're going through intense issues, even just lying flat 3 times a day for 1 minute does wonders for your adrenals and for your nervous system. So just laying flat with your eyes closed and taking a minute. We are all running around so disconnected from our bodies that we need a minute to get in touch with our body again, which is what the tapping too is great. It's like, hello, I'm here, we're together, just reminding your body that
Oh,
we're
I
one.
like that. Yeah. Do you see anything kind of that's recurring as with your clients in like women in midlife when it comes to that mind body connection? Like, are you seeing that women start to go through more of a spiritual shift? I do in my practice.
I think that it goes one way or the other. I think that if
Yes,
they don't stop themselves in their tracks and make a conscious effort to be connected, then I think they're very disconnected. And I think that's where alcohol also plays a
I was
large,
gonna say that. Yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
Uh, there's no question that a woman in perimenopause and menopause is often at the end of their rope for, their hormones are gone, their kids are leaving, their parents are dying, they're, getting divorced. There's so much that can be going on at that time. And being disconnected in somatic, we call it like dorsal. You're just disconnected. So you think you're dealing really well with life because you're calm, but really you have disconnected yourself. That's why you think you're calm.
Yeah,
It's a
yeah.
coping mechanism. And often the women that don't want to meditate and don't want to do breath work and take the time to do that, they're the most resistant ones are the ones that really need it the most. The
Yeah.
ones that say, like, I go to a sound bath healing and I just want to crawl out of my skin. It is so annoying. Why would anyone want to lay there?
Which I have to admit, I do say that about meditation because meditation drives me crazy. And I've tried so many times and I'm like, I can't stand it. Just want to like, no, no, stresses me out. But I do connect with breath work a lot. And I do find
Because
that
it's
that
more
helps.
active. It's probably because it's more active. So you
Yeah.
feel like more engaged and involved. So it's more
Yes.
interesting to you than just sitting there.
Yes. Same with hot yoga. Like I love hot yoga and it puts me in that meditative state, but it's moving meditation. So
Yeah.
it keeps my attention.
And
Which,
there's no
yeah,
right or wrong. It's like what
no.
works for you and whatever connects you again. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. But so important for women at this time. And I think that this is an opportunity. Like you said, it can go either way. And I see that too, where your body starts to tell you and call out to you that something's got to change and something's got to shift, and you got to start taking care of yourself finally at this time. And so women will either turn to the alcohol or get busier, right? Fill their days even more, do more to try to escape it, or you can listen to your body and honor what it's trying to tell you and take care of it and put the attention on yourself, probably for the first time in your life, right? We take care of so many people around us up until this time, and then it's like, okay, your kids are a little bit older now, if not out of the house, now is the time to maybe turn and look to see, okay, what do I want now?
Yeah, I do think it's an opportunity. And I think that's an eye roll for a lot of people, but I 100%
Hmm.
it's an opportunity. Just like any other time in our life where we've had some kind of hardship, it's an opportunity to really grow and become stronger. And
Yeah.
as annoying as that may sound, I really believe that. I know it's been that for me. I mean, I know when I hit perimenopause, I felt like I had been through so much in my life and I had conquered so much health-wise and everything. And I felt like I had all the answers. Then all of a sudden, I had anxiety and I thought, The only times in my life I had anxiety was with mold sickness and with parasites. And I know that I've taken care of all of that. And so I was like, no, what the heck is this? I thought I had all the answers. And that's when I went and dove into and got really well educated in hormones. But we have to be prepared throughout our life to pivot, to recognize when things have changed, and we have to be able to change as well because our bodies do not stay the same throughout our life, and we have to change with that.
Mhm. Amen, sister. On that note, thank you so much for coming on this show. Definitely gonna have to have you back. And I hope that all of you ladies that are listening, that you will take this advice to heart because it's really good advice. And I think that we can do so much better with our HRT if we can prepare our body for it. And so, the 3-month liver cleanse, love that. Just applying you don't have to do all the expensive testing if you can't afford it. Assume that your body could use these things because most of our bodies can. So, address the liver, address your gut, and address your mind and your soul. And I think that you'll do much better with it. So, thank you so much for coming on the show, Elizabeth.
Thank you, Karen.